Good morning, welcome, bienvenue à tous et toutes à Télé-High. My name is Alex Munter. I am the CEO here at CHEO, and we are gathered, of course, this morning on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We acknowledge and honor their stewardship of this land since time immemorial, as we honor and recognize all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. 500,000 children a year are helped here at CHEO, coming from across eastern and northern Ontario, western Quebec, and Nunavut. And children are the unsung heroes of this pandemic. Children have made enormous sacrifices for their well-being and for our collective well-being. And here at CHEO, we are paying close attention to the impact of the pandemic on kids in terms of learning loss, impact on development, and on physical and mental health. We are focused on these issues, on responding to the needs of kids, and on working as hard as we can to help our community move past the pandemic and turn the page on COVID. And that means we have worked very closely with Ottawa Public Health and community pediatricians, our Kids Come First health team partners, to vaccinate kids 12 to 17. And as we speak, we have groups working, doing detailed logistical planning to be ready to run clinics in schools, in the community, and across our region for 5 to 11-year-olds so that they can be afforded a measure of protection that a vaccine represents, and that we can increase our community immunity and the safety of schools and our whole city and region. So we're very excited to hear what the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister will be announcing today. And on that note, it is really my very great pleasure to welcome to CHEO for the first time, I think, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. And for a return visit to CHEO, and this is not a disclosure of personal health information since he said it publicly himself, but the Prime Minister is in fact the first Prime Minister of Canada to have been a patient at CHEO, but he's been back many times since. So welcome back, Prime Minister Trudeau. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Alex, for your kind words, but also for your extraordinary work as President and CEO of the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. I have fond memories of the amazing team here, but we have seen through this pandemic that you and the incredible team at CHEO really stepped up, as health workers did right across the country, to be there for our most vulnerable, to protect the community, and to support kids in very, very real ways. Chrystia and I had the opportunity to chat with some of the kids who are both patients and at school here at CHEO, and it really is extraordinary to see how resilient kids are. Faced with challenges, faced with crises, but it's all the more important, therefore, that we be there for them in every possible way to give them the supports they need, not just to get through this pandemic, but also to recognize everything that they're going to be able to contribute to our communities, our country, and our world over the coming decades if we make sure that we're giving them all the right supports and all the best opportunities for the future. Je suis très content d'être ici aujourd'hui avec la vice-première ministre pour faire 3 annonces importantes aujourd'hui. Les 2 premières, je vais les faire et je vais passer la parole à Chrystia pour la 3e annonce, mais on a des bonnes nouvelles pour les Canadiens aujourd'hui. As people know, Canada has been a world leader on vaccinations, and that's just part of what Canadians were able to do through this pandemic, where we saw everyone from frontline health workers to community workers to individual Canadians stepping up during this pandemic to be there for each other, to do the right things to get us through this. And it has culminated, of course, in vaccinations, as Canada is now among the world leaders in vaccination rates amongst eligible Canadians, that is, 12 and older. The government also, all the orders of government have been there to support Canadians, particularly on the federal side, where we scrambled to deliver PPE. We've scrambled to ensure that we have vaccines for everyone, and we're also ensuring booster shots for the coming years as they become necessary, listening to the expert advice that folks in NACI and other fields are going to be making on how we move forward. But when we talk about the high vaccination rates of Canadians, 82, 85, 87% in various jurisdictions of Canadians fully vaccinated, it's always eligible Canadians. Because we know, particularly those of us who are parents, like I am, of kids under 12, that not everyone can get vaccinated yet. We have heard that Pfizer has now submitted for regulatory approval at Health Canada a pediatric vaccine for kids 5 to 11. And this is great news. I can assure you that Health Canada is going to be examining attentively that submission. And even though I know parents are all going to be eager to get their kids vaccinated as quickly and as soon as possible, I want people to be patient because Health Canada is going to be taking the time necessary to ensure that, like all vaccines approved for use in Canada, vaccines approved for kids 5 to 11 will be fully safe and effective. It is extremely important that they go through all the full processes necessary so that every parent can have confidence when these vaccines do get approved that they will be safe for their children, to keep us all safe, to keep them safe, to keep our communities and schools safe as we move forward. And therefore, what I'm very pleased to be announcing today is that we have worked directly with Pfizer, and shortly after the time comes for Health Canada to approve those vaccines for pediatric use, we will receive millions of doses in Canada, enough to get all kids under between 5 and 11 vaccinated as quickly as possible. We will have the supply necessary to support every kid across the country from 5 to 11 with vaccinations as soon as possible after Health Canada approved it. C'est une bonne nouvelle aujourd'hui. Santé Canada, comme vous savez, est en train d'analyser les données et faire les processus rigoureux pour l'approbation du vaccin Pfizer pour les 5 à 11 ans. Et ils vont prendre le temps nécessaire pour s'assurer qu'il soit sécuritaire et efficace. Parce que tous les parents veulent que leurs enfants soient en sécurité, mais ils ne veulent pas prendre de risques non plus. Alors, vous pouvez savoir que si et quand Santé Canada va approuver l'utilisation du vaccin Pfizer pour les enfants, ça va être sécuritaire de le faire pour vos enfants. En même temps, je peux annoncer aujourd'hui qu'on a signé des ententes avec Pfizer pour que dès que ce soit approuvé pour utilisation au Canada, très peu après, nous allons recevoir assez de doses au Canada pour assurer la vaccination de tous les enfants au Canada de 5 à 11 ans. C'est une très bonne nouvelle pour tous les parents et tous les enfants à travers le pays parce que ça fait longtemps qu'on veut s'assurer que nos enfants aient la protection additionnelle que la vaccination leur donnera, comme plus que 80% des adultes au Canada ont déjà fait. Il y a quelques semaines, on a fait plusieurs promesses par rapport à nos priorités, par rapport à la vaccination, par rapport à la lutte contre la COVID. On a livré sur notre promesse d'assurer un mandat de vaccination obligatoire pour les trains et les avions, un mandat de vaccination obligatoire pour les travailleurs de la fonction publique. Et aujourd'hui, je suis content de pouvoir confirmer un troisième élément de cette promesse, c'est-à-dire la certification ou la preuve de vaccination uniforme pour les déplacements à l'international qui sera disponible à travers le pays. We made a commitment to ensure that there is a national standard for a proof-of-vaccination certificate that will be issued by every province and territory so that people can travel domestically, but particularly internationally. And today I'm happy to confirm that all provinces and territories have confirmed that they will be moving forward with a standardized national proof of vaccination. As of today, so far we have Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and all three provinces, all three territories, Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and Yukon, who already have put into use the national standard for proof of vaccination. You can download it onto your phone, you can print it out, you can ask for a copy by mail if you don't have those capacities, but you are now able to show proofs of vaccination immediately in all those provinces, and all other provinces have agreed and are working hard to come online so that as Canadians look to start traveling again, there will be a standardized proof of vaccination certificate that, as we said, we will be picking up the tab for at the federal level to ensure that all provinces are able to do it. And we'll also move forward on our other commitments we made around vaccinations and safety and COVID, which is moving forward on legislation to keep healthcare workers safe from intimidation and being hassled. So we can end this pandemic and get back to the things we love. It's a reminder as well, as we move forward on all these measures, for folks who still haven't yet gotten their full vaccinations, please get yourself vaccinated. It's the way we can all get back to the things we love, avoid further lockdowns, and make sure that our economy comes roaring back and we're keeping our most vulnerable as protected as possible. Troisièmement, et je vais passer la parole d'ici très peu à Chrystia Freeland pour en parler plus longuement, mais par rapport à la relance et la reprise économique, on a vu des bonnes nouvelles. D'abord, le Canada a déjà repris 100% des emplois qu'on avait perdus depuis le début de la pandémie. On voit beaucoup d'entreprises, beaucoup de croissance reprendre à travers l'économie, mais on reconnaît qu'il y a encore des secteurs qui sont durement touchés. On voit par exemple l'industrie du tourisme, les restaurateurs, particulièrement dans les centres-villes, qui ont encore énormément de défis avec les implications de la COVID-19. Et on a fait une promesse très directe aux Canadiens qu'on allait être là pour les appuyer aussi longtemps que nécessaire, mais qu'on allait aussi être là pour assurer une relance économique forte et rapide. Et donc, je suis très, très content de pouvoir passer la parole maintenant à la ministre Freeland pour partager les éléments des prochaines étapes de notre plan pour lutter contre la COVID-19 et appuyer les Canadiens tout en facilitant une reprise économique rapide et forte. Alors, je suis très content maintenant. I'm very happy now to pass the podium over to Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, Prime Minister, for that great news about vaccines for children. That is really great news for children, for families, for schools, and for our economy. Quand la crise de la COVID a frappé, notre gouvernement a rapidement lancé divers programmes généraux afin d'amortir le plus grand choc économique du pays depuis la Grande Dépression. L'objectif était simple, prévenir autant que possible les séquelles économiques et aider les travailleurs et les employeurs à travers la pandémie et les restrictions qu'elle a amenées. D'un bout à l'autre du pays, ces programmes ont donné une bouffée d'oxygène aux travailleurs et aux entreprises. Ils ont protégé des millions d'emplois et aidé des centaines de milliers d'entreprises canadiennes à poursuivre leur activité au plus creux de la pandémie. Our emergency support measures were always designed to be temporary, to get us through the crisis. Thankfully, as the Prime Minister has just pointed out, we're now in a new phase, one that is very different from the darkest days in our fight against COVID. We have recovered lost jobs, vaccination rates are high and will get higher as it becomes possible to vaccinate more of our children. Borders are reopening, and the fourth wave appears to be coming under control in many parts of the country. Last month, as the Prime Minister has just reminded us, we reached our goal, as promised in last year's throne speech, of creating 1 million jobs. Canada has now recovered 100% of the jobs lost in the depth of the COVID recession. And compare that to the United States, which has only recovered 78%. Children are back in school. We have accomplished all of this together while sticking to health restrictions that have saved lives. And by that essential measure, Canada is second only to Japan in the G7. So there are many reasons to be optimistic about what we've already achieved. Our economy is rebounding, and we are winning the fight against COVID. However, it's also true that the recovery is uneven and that the health measures that are saving lives continue to restrict some economic activity. That is why today we are announcing what we very much hope and believe is the final pivot in delivering the support needed to ensure a robust recovery. The existing income and business support programs will end on October 23rd, as previously announced. We are moving from the very broad-based support that was appropriate at the height of our lockdowns to more targeted measures that will provide help where it is needed while prudently managing government finances. And now I'll outline the new programs that we intend to put in place as of October 24th. Premièrement, je vais vous parler du soutien que nous allons continuer d'offrir pour les emplois et les entreprises. Nous continuerons de porter une attention constante aux emplois et à la croissance. C'est pourquoi nous allons prolonger le programme d'embauche pour la relance du Canada jusqu'à 7 mai 2022 à un taux de 50%. Ainsi, les entreprises pourront continuer de réembaucher des travailleurs et de créer les emplois supplémentaires dont nous avons encore besoin. De plus, nous sommes conscients que certaines entreprises sont incapables de répondre toutes leurs activités en raison des restrictions sanitaires nécessaires qui sont encore en place. C'est pour cette raison que nous proposons 2 nouveaux vols de soutien ciblé pour la relance. Le premier vol est le programme de relance pour le tourisme et l'accueil, offrira du soutien aux employeurs par l'intermédiaire des programmes de subventions salariales et d'aide au loyer. On parle ici des hôteliers, des restaurateurs et des agences de voyage qui font encore face à des restrictions visant la santé publique et les voyages. Le taux de subvention accordé à ce groupe d'entreprises très ciblées commencera à 40% pour les demandeurs ayant subi une perte de revenus de 40%. Le taux augmentera en fonction de la perte de revenus jusqu'à concurrence de 75%. The second stream, the hardest hit business recovery program, will be available to employers who can show they have faced deep and enduring losses and will provide support through the wage and rent subsidy programs. The subsidy rate for this group will start at 10% for applicants with a 50% revenue loss, increasing to a maximum 50% subsidy for those with a 75% revenue loss. Support through both of these new streams will be available from October 24th to May 7th of next year. From March 13th to May 7th, the support will decrease by half as we prepare for a full recovery and the end of these extraordinary pandemic-related benefits. The eligibility for these programs will be a two-key system. One key will consider whether the employer has faced a significant revenue loss over the course of 12 months of the pandemic. The second key is revenue loss in the current month. And finally, we are creating a new lockdown support program that will be available in case the pandemic requires further local lockdowns in any part of the country. For those businesses that face temporary local lockdowns, we will make the wage and rent subsidy available up to the maximum amount for the duration of the local lockdown. We're putting this insurance policy in place now to ensure that provinces, territories, and municipalities can continue to make the right public health choices, knowing that support will be there for workers and businesses. Et nous allons aussi tenir notre promesse électorale d'offrir du soutien aux artistes et aux techniciens. Deuxièmement, nous faisons quelques ajustements au programme de soutien aux revenus créé dans le contexte de la pandémie pour qu'il concorde avec la nouvelle phase de la relance. Comme c'est le cas pour les mesures de soutien aux entreprises, nous passons de programmes généraux à du soutien plus ciblé. We're still fighting the fourth wave of this pandemic, and it is particularly virulent in some parts of the country. Temporary local lockdowns are still a possibility in the months to come. We want Canadians to know that we intend now to put in place a measure that would snap into action immediately to support workers in the event of a new local lockdown. As the CRB has done up until now, this new benefit, the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, would provide $300 a week to workers who are subject to a lockdown, including those who are ineligible for employment insurance. We also know that Canadians across the country may need continued support from the Canada Sickness Benefit and the Canada Caregiving Benefit. We all need to protect ourselves and one another by staying home when we're sick. And our children, many of whom still cannot be vaccinated, are particularly vulnerable, which means parents may need to be able to stay home to take care of them. So, we intend to extend eligibility for both of these benefits until May 7th of next year, and will increase the maximum duration of each benefit by 2 additional weeks. We estimate the total cost of these measures from October 24th through to May 7th of next year will be $7.4 billion. That compares to the $289 billion we have spent on income and business supports since the start of the pandemic. Notre gouvernement comprend le fier héritage du Canada pour ce qui est sa gestion financière prudente et l'importance de préserver cette tradition de rigueur. Fighting COVID required unprecedented government spending in Canada and around the world. Canadians supported that unprecedented spending because they understood that it was not only the compassionate thing to do, it was the economically smart thing to do. And they understood that providing support to businesses and workers during lockdowns allowed us all to do the right thing together and to save lives. Aujourd'hui, au moment où l'économie se rétablit et des emplois sont créés, où nous nous faisons vacciner et les restrictions sont levées prudemment dans nos communautés et à nos frontières. Il est temps d'adapter nos mesures de soutien aux revenus et aux entreprises à ces circonstances plus heureuses. Today, our support needs to be more narrow, more targeted, and less expensive. And we need to look forward to the day, now not too far off, when we will be able to bring it to an end entirely. Our unrelenting objective is to protect and create jobs and to drive economic growth. It is to ensure the strongest possible recovery for everyone. Merci.
Merci. On va maintenant commencer la période de questions avec Chrystia de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Vous dites qu'on change de phase. Il faut payer moins cher pour les programmes d'aide. Il faut que les programmes d'aide soient plus ciblés. Est-ce que ça veut dire que vous avez subi peut-être des pressions, notamment au niveau de la PCRE, qui peut nuire à l'embauche, au problème de pénurie de main-d'œuvre, et que la relance économique qui est à venir était un peu sur les stéroïdes et que là, vous essayez de rétablir un niveau plus stable ou plus juste au niveau de l'économie?
À chaque étape de cette pandémie, on a suivi les besoins médicaux, les besoins de la science, les recommandations des experts et ce lien entre le marché du travail et l'économie et la réalité sanitaire à laquelle on faisait face. Dans les premières phases de la pandémie, c'était extrêmement important que les gens restent chez eux. Et donc, oui, la PCRE et les autres enjeux, les autres programmes étaient là pour permettre aux gens de rester à la maison parce qu'on ne voulait pas qu'ils aillent au travail. Évidemment, on est en train de voir que l'économie reprend dans la plupart des secteurs maintenant. Et on reconnaît qu'il y a effectivement une pénurie de main-d'œuvre dans certains secteurs et les gens ont la possibilité maintenant de retourner au travail. Et donc, de continuer un appui général avec la PCE n'est pas tout à fait nécessaire pour l'économie. Mais en même temps, on sait que dans certains endroits, il y a des chances, on l'espère que non, il y a des chances que la situation d'éclosion locale exige plus de mesures de lockdown. Et donc, nous allons être là pour appuyer les gens qui sont affectés directement dans les endroits où ils sont. Mais avec ce qu'on voit à travers le pays maintenant, c'est plus logique ni souhaitable de préserver ces soutiens généraux. On préfère être plus ciblé pour les individus qui sont dans une situation de fermeture locale, mais aussi pour les entreprises dans des secteurs comme le tourisme, le secteur des arts et de la culture, qui ont encore besoin de soutien ciblé.
Pour les entreprises qui pensent en avoir encore besoin et qui ne font pas partie de ces groupes-là, qu'est-ce que vous avez à leur dire? Parce qu'ils vont trouver qu'il y a des revenus qui vont leur manquer. Donc, qu'avez-vous à leur dire à eux? Et deuxièmement, si ça va coûter moins cher, ça va coûter combien?
On a fait la promesse pendant la campagne électorale que les secteurs les plus durement touchés, comme le secteur du tourisme, on allait être là pour des appuis jusqu'à 75% pour des pertes de revenus. C'est ce qu'on livre aujourd'hui. On ajoute à ça du soutien pour le secteur d'hospitalité, comme les restaurants, qui, on sait, particulièrement, comme j'ai mentionné, dans les centres-villes, où il y a encore beaucoup de défis à reprendre les chiffres et les clients qu'on avait avant. On va être là pour les aider. Pour les secteurs qui ne sont pas les plus durement touchés, comme les secteurs touristiques, nous allons quand même mettre de l'avant un programme pour aider ces entreprises qui ont subi des pertes de 50 à 75% de façon durable depuis un an. avec de l'aide qui va aller de 10% jusqu'à 50% de soutien. Donc, il y a encore des programmes pour ces entreprises qui sont durement touchées, mais il y en aura moins parce qu'on sait que l'économie commence à reprendre. Et comme Mme Freeland l'a dit, le coût total de fin octobre jusqu'au mois de mai est autour de 7 milliards de dollars.
David Aiken, Global News. Good morning, everybody. Just a note, would have been helpful to have some background documents on a new $7 billion spending program. We don't have a piece of information, so I'm looking forward to getting that information, Minister Freeland, from your folks. Question about the...
They are available. We will get them.
We don't have them yet. We got lots of stuff on the vaccine passport. It was great to get a briefing and things like that. Okay. Just put that out there first. Listen, it's the first time we had a chance to ask you about Admiral MacDonald's letter to the generals and staff officers, flag officers. I wonder, first of all, what you make of that letter, and can you see any circumstances in which Admiral MacDonald will resume his duties as the Chief of the Defence Staff?
First of all, in response to Admiral MacDonald's letter, the acting Chief of Defence Staff and the Minister of National Defence gave extremely direct responses to it, to which I have and had nothing to add. They very much speak for both the forces and the government in response to that. It is important that we take the right decisions in the right way to ensure that survivors and all who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces are at the center of decisions taken. Certainly, the personal views expressed by Admiral MacDonald in that letter do not align with what the practices or approach that we have of putting victims and survivors at the center of everything we do, and it will be taken into account as we make a final determination on the permanent post of Chief of Defence Staff.
You said before, when we've asked about some of the issues with the military, that they don't get it, I think, was roughly some of the... they're not getting the problem here. And yet, your government is still allowing the military to try to solve the problem. And at what point do you say to Ms. Arbour, we need some interim measures, or take a more direct approach? I mean, even since MacDonald's letter, we've had a couple of instances of more generals who are now subject to investigation. So what's it going to take?
We are absolutely taking this seriously, and with every new revelation that confirms that there is a deep cultural problem at Canada's military that isn't worthy of the extraordinary women and men who choose to serve. Even as we talk about these issues facing the military, we have Canadian Armed Forces members stepping up to help out in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, elsewhere across the country, and elsewhere around the world. We have an extraordinary military that continues to deliver for Canadians, and it is necessary that the processes, the resources, and the leadership of this military be worthy of the extraordinary women and men who choose to dedicate their lives to service and their families to service to this country. We have made significant steps. There is a lot more to do. And yes, indeed, that change is not happening as rapidly as we would all like to see, and that's why we're continuing to work with external experts and people within the highest ranks of the military to make sure that these changes are being made as quickly and as lastingly as possible. D'abord, le ministre de la Défense et le chef de l'état-major actuel ont répondu directement et fermement à la lettre de l'amiral, et je n'ai rien à ajouter à leur réponse très très claire là-dessus, sauf que pour dire qu'évidemment, quand nous allons prendre des décisions sur le poste permanent du chef d'état-major, nous allons prendre en compte le besoin de mettre les survivants et des gens et leur vulnérabilité au centre du leadership et des processus des forces armées. Et certainement, cette perspective apportée par l'amiral MacDonald dans sa lettre, on va en tenir compte quand nous allons prendre des décisions finales.
Hello, Maina Karaman-Williams, Globe and Mail. Mr. Trudeau, for several years now, the number of sitting days in the House of Commons has been below average. So why are you continuing this trend by waiting until November 22nd to have MPs return to the House, especially since you say you want to get back to work?
I think, first of all, Canadians recognize that we've had a pandemic for the past year and a half, and that has directly affected the amount of sitting days in the House. But despite that, particularly with a hybrid approach to Parliament, we've been able to get historic supports out to Canadians by working collaboratively with other parties in significant ways. This is my third federal election as leader, and they've all been in the fall. This is the longest we will have in terms of weeks of House sitting following an election. I look forward to working with other parties in the House on getting big things done for Canadians. As we've demonstrated, this government has gotten to work right away after the election to deliver on vaccine mandates, on supports, on many important things for Canadians, and we'll continue to do that. I will highlight, however, that it will be extremely important that everyone be vaccinated when the House returns. And from the announcement of the return of the House, if someone who didn't get vaccinated, has an MP who hasn't yet gotten vaccinated, chooses to get vaccinated with the first and then the wait and then the second dose, they should be able to return to the House in time for the return of the House on November 22nd, because it's important that we be keeping everyone safe on that.
On a different note, Federal Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion said you are free to release all correspondence between your office and his office regarding your vacations, including your most recent trip to Tofino. So will you release all your correspondence with the Ethics Commissioner regarding your vacations?
We have been open and transparent throughout the past 6 years on working with the Ethics Commissioner and disclosing what is necessary to disclose, and we will continue to be open and transparent with Canadians.
Hi, Prime Minister. On the international vaccine passport issue announced today, you still don't have 100% of compliance domestically. So how confident are you that Europe, the United States, and other international countries will accept this as a valid proof of vaccination for international travel?
First of all, we do have 100% compliance across provinces and territories. All provinces and territories have agreed to a national standard that will be an accepted proof of vaccination for destinations around the world. It is correct that not every province has yet delivered on that, but I know they are all working very quickly and should have resolved that in the weeks to come, certainly in time for people starting to travel again as we ease off some of those travel restrictions and demand proof of vaccinations for traveling. There are many different standards being looked at around the world. Europe has one. We are using the Smart Health Card format that many places in the United States and elsewhere around the world are using. We are very confident that this proof of vaccination certificate that will be federally approved, issued by the provinces with the health information for Canadians, is going to be accepted at destinations worldwide as proof of vaccination. Okay. D'abord, nous avons l'approbation et l'engagement de tous les provinces et territoires sur l'utilisation d'une preuve de vaccination uniforme canadienne pour des voyages à l'international. Un grand nombre de provinces et tous les territoires l'ont déjà en place. Les autres sont en train de travailler pour les livrer dans les semaines à venir et je suis très confiant qu'ils vont être disponibles pour les Canadiens à mesure qu'ils se mettent à voyager. Et si jamais une province ou d'autres prend plus de temps pour le faire, il y a encore des preuves de vaccination qui vont être acceptées pour actuelles pour des voyages domestiques et probablement à l'international aussi. Mais on va y arriver dans les semaines à venir avec un certificat uniforme à travers le pays.
And I have a question about the benefits program that was announced today. I think it's easy to see how businesses would transition based on the benchmarks that have been announced. But for individuals relying on the CRB for income support, moving entirely to a lockdown workers benefit. How do they transition? What are the criteria? Is this only for places under harsh local lockdowns, or people who are just unable to go back to work in a particular sector? How do they get income support under these new measures that start in just 3 days?
That's an excellent question, and it's something that the Minister and I have spoken about extensively over the past number of weeks, and I'll turn it over to her. But just to say that we are ensuring that we are both continuing to be there for Canadians, to have people's backs, as we've always said they would, while ensuring that the economy comes roaring back. And that's the principle that we're building on right now. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chrystia to speak to more details on this transition.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Prime Minister, and thanks for the question. So let me just start by emphasizing that these programs were conceived from the outset, and I think clearly and broadly understood by Canadians as unprecedented emergency support measures that were there because we did an astonishing thing as a country. We decided to close down our economy to save lives. And I'm proud of what we did as a country, and broadly it has worked. And our support measures have worked too. Canada has had a very robust jobs recovery. We have hit the 1 million jobs target, which the Prime Minister laid out in the speech for the throne last year. We have now recovered 100% of the jobs lost in the pandemic. Now, there is still work to do to get to the employment and labor force participation levels that we want to achieve. But a lot has been done. And so when it comes to income support, the most important thing I'd like to emphasize for people, as the Prime Minister said in his opening remarks, is if the fourth wave or some unexpected additional wave were to hit us, we want public health authorities to know, and we want workers to know that that support will be there. It will be there and will be able to snap back into place immediately for workers. That's the key element. Second really important element is a lot of people, and I heard this very often on the campaign trail from mothers, a lot of people have depended on the sickness benefit and the caregiver benefit during the pandemic. The need for that continues, and we are extending that benefit and adding 2 additional weeks. You will also recall our campaign promise to have 10 paid sick days. So that support is there too. And then the final thing I would point to as support for workers and jobs is our extension of the Canada Hiring Recovery Benefit. This is really important in terms of driving job creation, creating additional spaces for workers. And one element that people have been pointing to, I think rightly, about the jobs recovery is that there are some people who are working but are maybe not working as many hours as they would like. The Recovery Hiring Benefit can be used by employers to give workers who are on the payroll now additional hours. So those are the support measures we have in place to help workers and to drive the best possible support for a Canadian is actually a job. And that's what these programs are designed to really promote.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, on the question of mandatory vaccination for members of Parliament, what did Mr. O'Toole tell you about the number of MPs in his caucus who are not vaccinated? And are you not concerned that their constituents will lose their voice in Parliament if they are not allowed to attend? Would you consider other ways of allowing them to participate if they are not vaccinated?
Let's first of all talk about those constituents. In every single province and territory across this country, the majority of Canadians have done the right thing and gotten vaccinated, gotten fully vaccinated. So It is puzzling to me that there are people out there who think that just because they are members of Parliament, they do not need to keep themselves, their loved ones, or their constituents safe when the vast majority of Canadians have done the right thing. All parties in this House, except for the Conservatives, are unequivocal in terms of our own safety individually, in terms of the safety of the people who work in the House, in terms of making sure that Canadians are safe when they go into constituency offices to get services from the federal government. Members of Parliament need to be fully vaccinated. It is on Mr. O'Toole to explain why he thinks people should not be fully vaccinated if they want to serve as members of Parliament, and why, indeed, he doesn't even think there should be a hybrid model so those who aren't fully vaccinated can still speak up for their constituents in the House of Commons, as both the NDP and the Liberal Party are fully open to continuing to do. So those are questions for Mr. O'Toole, but I know that Canadians expect their members of Parliament to be leaders, and every party has recognized that vaccination is the way through this. It seems a very small thing that when we're asking every Canadian who wants to go into a restaurant in Ontario, for example, where the House of Commons sits, to be fully vaccinated, we should be asking the same thing of members of Parliament as well. It's not too much to ask. Okay. Je pense que c'est très clair que la grande majorité des Canadiens dans toutes les provinces et territoires ont choisi de se faire pleinement vacciner. Et ces députés qui représentent ces Canadiens d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays ne devraient pas avoir une dispension spéciale à cause de leur statut de député qui devrait leur permettre de ne pas se faire vacciner ou de mettre à risque les citoyens qui viendraient chercher des services dans leur bureau de comté, ou bien qui mettraient à risque d'autres députés qui représentent des citoyens dans d'autres parties du pays en allant à la Chambre des communes de façon non vaccinée. Je pense que c'est à M. O'Toole d'expliquer cette incohérence, d'accepter que des gens qui devraient être un modèle, démontrer du leadership pour le reste du pays, quand on sait que la vaccination, c'est la façon de passer à travers cette pandémie, de eux-mêmes se faire vacciner pour se protéger, pour protéger leur communauté, pour protéger leurs collègues à la Chambre des communes. Et en plus, il y a une incohérence assez importante dans la position des conservateurs qui non seulement veulent que des députés non vaccinés soient permis de venir à Ottawa siéger à côté de députés qui soient vaccinés, mais ils veulent non plus qu'on ait un modèle hybride qui permettrait justement à ceux qui ne seraient pas vaccinés de quand même participer pour parler pour leurs commettants à la Chambre des communes par vidéo. Alors, je pense que M. O'Toole a beaucoup d'explications à donner.
Throughout the pandemic, hospitals across the country have been trying to limit the number of visitors they have. And as you've noted in your remarks, the children under the age of 12 are not vaccinated by definition. And yet here we are at a facility that treats many children with autoimmune issues, many children staying in Roger Nielsen House who are undergoing cancer treatment. Why did you, and I understand you probably adhere to all the measures that were required of you, but why did you think bringing us here to a children's hospital during a pandemic was a good idea for a photo op?
I think, first of all, this is an important opportunity, as always, to thank our frontline healthcare workers, to recognize the extraordinary work they've done, and to reassure Canadians and parents that we are there working with and listening to the top experts across the country when it comes to their kids' safety. I know that parents are eager to see the vaccines available for 5 to 11-year-olds, but I also know that parents want to know that those vaccines will be safe, which is why Health Canada will be taking the necessary time and rigorous processes to ensure that that is safe before approving it, so that when it is approved, and we have those vaccines in Canada ready to go for Canadians, as we will rapidly after approval, parents can get those vaccines done. In regards to public health and safety, I can assure you that we work closely with Alex and his staff to make sure that no one is at risk as we move forward in various events like this one.
Bonjour, Olivier Ferrand-Boissé de TVA. Monsieur le Premier ministre, je veux revenir sur le retour du Parlement le 22 novembre. Avant les élections, bon, on sentait d'autre part une urgence justement d'aller en élection. Et puis là, ben, c'est 63 jours après le 20 septembre où on va retourner au travail. Certains diront qu'ils auraient préféré pouvoir avoir du temps pour justement peut-être discuter, avoir des débats sur les programmes dont vous venez d'annoncer la prolongation et les modifications aujourd'hui. N'y voyez-vous pas un contraste?
Au contraire, depuis la fin des élections, nous avons agi immédiatement sur un mandat de vaccination pour les trains, pour les avions, pour la fonction publique fédérale. Nous sommes en train de s'assurer que les parlementaires conservateurs qui ne se sont pas fait vacciner encore ont le temps de se faire pleinement vacciner avant que la Chambre revienne. Et nous sommes en train de travailler pas seulement avec les autres partis, mais aussi avec des organismes, des chambres de commerce, des syndicats à travers le pays pour s'assurer que les appuis pour la relance économique et pour les Canadiens, étant donné que cette crise de COVID continue de différentes façons, soient là. Nous sommes au travail, nous allons continuer de l'être et j'ai bien hâte de pouvoir reprendre les travaux parlementaires avec les autres pour 4 semaines de travail quand on revient en fin novembre.
Élection Canada propose une redistribution des sièges dans laquelle on ajouterait 4 sièges au Canada, mais le Québec en perdrait un. Il y a la chef de l'opposition à Québec qui vous a envoyé une lettre, je ne sais pas si vous l'avez lue, mais qui vous appelle à défendre donc le maintien de ce poids du Québec aux communes. Est-ce que vous vous engagez justement à ce que le Québec maintienne ses 78 sièges au Parlement?
Nous sommes en train de regarder cette proposition émise par Élection Canada. Je souligne que c'est une proposition indépendante d'Élection Canada et ce n'est pas une proposition du gouvernement. Nous allons donc étudier, nous allons avoir beaucoup de temps pour en discuter entre parlementaires et entre Canadiens pour les moments à venir, parce que c'est quelque chose de très sérieux d'ajuster la composition de la Chambre des communes. Il va falloir le faire, mais on veut s'assurer que ça soit fait de la bonne façon et j'entends très clairement la préoccupation de plusieurs Canadiens, dont des Québécois, par rapport à la proposition d'Élection Canada. Nous allons continuer de travailler là-dessus. We are looking very carefully at the proposal by Elections Canada on redistribution of the electoral map. It is a proposal by Elections Canada and not a government proposal. We are looking carefully at it. Redistribution matters for fairness in our democracy. I have clearly heard concerns from a number of people, including Quebecers, about what Elections Canada has proposed, and I can assure everyone there will be lots of time to analyze, to debate, to calculate, to look at what the right path forward is to continue to have a strong, robust democracy that makes sure that everyone gets properly heard.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. Albertans are apparently voting in pretty strong numbers in the provinces, that is, voting yes, in the province's referendum on the elimination of Canada's equalization program. With that seeming popular mandate, advocates are now calling on the federal government to sit down with Alberta and discuss the prospect of reforming equalization. Will you consider discussing with Alberta adjustments to that scheme?
First of all, to eliminate equalization, which is what's proposed in Jason Kenney's referendum, is something that cannot be done by the federal government. It needs to be done by the federal government working with 7 provinces or territories representing over 50% of the Canadian population. So this is something that Mr. Kenney should have known going into it, but it is something that we're clear to say. Any amendment to the Constitution of this type requires consensus, significant consensus across the country. And I'm sure these are things that Mr. Kenney is going to want to bring up at the Council of Federation meetings in the coming weeks. Secondly, there's something that has always struck me as incredibly political about what Mr. Kenney has done around stoking up concerns around equalization. Given the current formula for equalization that is applied in Alberta and indeed across the country was actually put in place and created by the government in which Mr. Kenney sat around a cabinet table. So he himself contributed and approved of the current equalization formula that he's now stirring up sentiment against a few years later. I find that the kind of politics that is not necessarily helpful at a time where this federal government has delivered more supports across the country, including to Alberta, than any government in history. And we will continue and are continuing right now with members of the Canadian Red Cross and the Canadian Armed Forces present to support Alberta through the very difficult times they're going through, linked to decisions that the Premier himself made and didn't make over the past few months, resulting in a fourth wave. D'abord, pour faire tout changement à notre système de péréquation, ça exige pas seulement une décision par un gouvernement fédéral ou une province, mais un changement de la Constitution impliquant 7 provinces et territoires représentant plus que 50% de la population du Canada. Alors, je recommande à M. Kenney de souligner ses préoccupations avec la péréquation, avec ses collègues autour de la table du Conseil de la Fédération pour pouvoir avancer ses arguments là-dessus. Mais je sais que les premiers ministres d'autres provinces vont avoir la même question que moi, c'est-à-dire que puisque c'est M. Kenney lui-même qui faisait partie du Conseil des ministres qui a négocié la formule actuelle de péréquation, en quoi il est en désaccord avec les décisions qu'il a prises il y a une dizaine d'années sur la péréquation.
Back to the question of proof of vaccination. Airlines have expressed a lot of resistance to the idea that they might be responsible for enforcing or for checking these proof of vaccinations at the thousands of check-in counters and boarding gates that exist at airports across the country. So to confirm, is it federal security authorities who will be responsible for confirming one's vaccination at airports, or is it airlines?
We have worked very closely with airline operators to ensure that it is as seamless and easy a process as possible. And the fact that the proof of vaccination certificate that will be pan-Canadian includes a QR code means that it will be a step for the vast majority of people at the virtual check-in, where they simply have to scan their QR code and they will get a boarding pass that is clearly marked upon it, vaccination approved. So there is no actual slowdown. It's a single extra step on check-in in a digital way. But it will not be overly onerous for anyone in the process that while they check the name and the gate number on the boarding pass, will also see a green check mark or whatever it is that ensures that they know that the vaccination requirements have been met.
Thank you. This is what ends today's press conference.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.